Hi, this is Josh with Stuff to Make Stuff. In today's video, we're really excited to show you our new acrylic slab flattener. This thing's great for flattening anything from small cutting boards or charcuteries all the way up to large tables. We have a bunch of different options for this and different sizes that you can check out at s2ms.com.
The first thing that I like to do when assembling the router sled is start with the brushes. We cut these grooves in a pinwheel pattern so the brushes are easier to insert. So you start by putting the brushes in halfway and you can just slide them until they touch each other. Now several minutes ago I went ahead and started heating up my hot glue gun. Now when you have your hot glue gun, you want to make sure you don't have the one that my kindergartner has that's low temp. You want one that's high temp or low high temp, and make sure it's on high temperature and nice and hot before you start doing this. Now I'm putting the glue in. I put it in a little bit more heavy on the ends and an extra little dab in the middle there. Now your working time on this is limited, so you want to go ahead and push that in. I'm using a screwdriver to push it down nice and flat on the edge of my workbench here. So pushing in nice and good, and you can see some of the glue ooze out a little bit. When we're done, I'll show you the other side. It mounted up really nice. Pull out our second brush, add some more glue. Just put in the Goldilocks amount, just not too much, not too little. And then I'll use my screwdriver here to push it in again. Now looking at the side, look, we can see that we got nice contact with the brush. It kind of oozes up on the edge. Now we only did 2 of the brushes. We'll do the other 2 after the hot glue gun has a chance to fully heat back up. Now I'm laying out my bearings for the trucks right here, putting the acrylic pieces on top. And I'll go ahead and mount these brackets on top. I like the bolt heads go to the side. When you're putting the bolts in, you want to go ahead and check out the manual, and it'll show you which bolts go where. One option that you have with these is that we have these height adjustment blocks that you can go ahead and slip in if you're working on something taller. Now, if you use these height adjustment blocks, then you'll need to grab the bag with the longer bolts. That's just for these height adjustment blocks. But with the piece that we're flattening today, we don't need these, so we'll go ahead and pop the shorter bolts back in. And once again, we're just going to put these bolts in, not all the way, just so they're loose. Now that our hot glue gun's warmed back up, we're going to go ahead and put in the last 2 brushes. Working quick and making sure we get enough, particularly on the edges. Press it in quickly. Now we've got all the brushes in, we'll go ahead and put the bolts in the bearings on the router plate. Once we get them all in, we'll go ahead and just put them in loosely. Once again, you don't want to tighten it. And I'm wiping down the rails, get any dust off of them. I'll gently slip them through the bearings. Once we have those in, we'll go ahead and put the end caps on, slide those in, and we'll tighten up these brackets. Now, what this allows us to do is gets all the bearings aligned to each other and makes the setup good. Now we can go ahead and tighten the bearings on the router carriage, get them in there nice and firm. And then we'll put our table rails through, wiggling them in until they get in nice and gently. You don't want to force them. And now we can tighten the bolts on the trucks. If you don't do it in this order, sometimes it'll still work, but this guarantees that all the bearings will be aligned perfectly. Now we'll go ahead and screw in our dust port. Now the first rail, when you put it on, the alignment isn't critical. You just want to get it straight to the edge of your table. So I'll go ahead and put in a couple screws. Before mounting the router carriage, we want to go ahead and put the router on. So you want to line it so that the handles go towards the long side of the router, and that way you don't have to worry about the handles interfering with these bars in a minute. Go ahead and slip these bars into the truck on the end. Get the other truck on the rail. There's a few different ways of doing it. This is the way I did it this time. Now we'll slip this on. Now the second rail needs to be perfectly parallel to the first rail. If it's not, then you'll get binding. So you need to make sure these brackets are all tightened up. So tighten this side and tighten the other side. And then we'll slide it back and forth. And that way if there's any built up tension in the system, it'll kind of relieve and the rail will kind of relax to the spot that it wants to be. And we'll go ahead and put in the screw once we got the spot. And then we'll drive it back and forth to make sure that the other side doesn't have any stress built up into it. The rail's where it wants to be. And then we'll put in the other screw. I'm testing just to make sure that it's nice and parallel and there's no binding in it. And we'll use these end brackets here to keep the router from sliding off. If you don't have these, you can put a block of wood on the ends just to keep it from sliding off the rails. Now this board isn't totally flat. It's warped a little bit. So I'm kind of looking at the edges here to see if there's one side that we want to take a little bit more off of, if there's some rot or some sort of defect. This one's pretty normal on both sides. So we're going to go ahead and shim up on both sides. I'm just using door shims from the hardware store. You can also use a scrap of wood or whatever you have to make it flat. Make sure it's a little bit flat. And then you're not always able to, but on this setup, since the board's so wide, I'm leaving a gap on the end here so the router can pass by without cutting into the board if I want to make a clean pass to get around. Now I'm just putting a little bit of glue, maybe an inch in a few spots. Inch there, a little bit here. Then I'll just wiggle a little bit so the glue just works its way just a tiny bit underneath. You don't want too much, so it's so hard to peel off. And we'll let the glue set for a minute before we start flattening. So now I'm adjusting my router bit so I can just make a shallow first pass. If the board warps, a lot of times you want to start with just a shallow pass, because sometimes with board warp you'll end up getting a heavier pass than what you expect. So here we have the two main kinds of bits. When you're shopping for bits, you want to look for a spoil board bit. The one on the left is a cemented carbide bit, and the one on the right is an interchangeable, replaceable carbide bit. All right, now we're all set up and we're ready to see this in action. You can see how quickly and easily this goes back and forth over the piece of wood. You can see your progress easily through the clear acrylic. The total flattening time on this curly maple was about 2 minutes. Now that we're done with the planer, you can see that this is perfectly flat. We're ready to hit it with some sandpaper, cut it to size, and put finish on it. Let us know how your assembly worked out for you in the comments below, and we hope you enjoy this as much as we do.